On Monday, in a 5-4 ruling, the Supreme Court allowed the Trump administration to use the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 to deport invading migrants, but the court also said that migrants must get a court hearing before they are taken from the U.S. Even though dissenting justices, like Sonia Sotomayor, said the ruling will make it harder for people to challenge deportations individually, ACLU attorneys are hopeful that since the High Court said potential deportees are allowed due process, civil rights lawyers at least have some legal footing to fight back. Then on Tuesday, a federal judge ordered the White House to restore the AP's full access to cover presidential events after the White House denied them access to certain areas because the AP refused to change the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. The judge said, under the First Amendment, if the government opens its doors to some journalists, it cannot shut those doors on other journalists because of their viewpoints. The Constitution requires no less. Julie Pace, the AP's executive editor, wrote, "For anyone who thinks this lawsuit against Trump's White House is about the name of a body of water, think bigger. It's really about whether the government can control what you say." Then on Wednesday, Trump announced a 90-day pause on reciprocal tariffs on most nations, kept his 10% baseline tariffs, and raised tariffs on China to 125%. After Trump's announcement, the S&P stock index rose 9.5%, making up about 70% of its losses over the past 4 days. Trump gave 2 reasons for the pause. 1, he said he was concerned with the bond market, which he said was very tricky. And 2, he said his tariffs motivated more than 75 countries to reach out to make trade deals with the US. Critics worry that Trump's actions, whether intentional or reactionary, are lowering investors' confidence in the US, who may look for stability outside of US markets. On top of that, due to a social media post Trump sent out hours before his announcement, critics worry that Trump is using his power to manipulate the stock market for financial gain for himself and for his friends. The next day, the Supreme Court, in a 9-0 unsigned ruling, said that Kilmar Abrego Gracia was illegally deported and that the Trump administration must start taking the necessary steps to return him back to the United States. Justice Sonia Sotomayor said that the Trump administration's misguided stance on the case implies that they could deport and incarcerate any person, including a U.S. citizen, without legal consequence, so long as it does so before a court can intervene. And that view refutes itself. However, before Garcia can be retrieved, the case must go back to a trial court to ensure that the process to return him does not interfere with foreign affairs. It was this part of the ruling that the Trump administration has highlighted as a win for them, and said that they look forward to continuing to advance their position in the case. Then on Friday, an immigration judge rules that Mahmoud Khalil can be deported because she said that the government established clear and convincing evidence that he posed potentially serious foreign policy consequences and is removable. Mahmoud was detained by federal immigration agents on March 8th for his role in pro-Palestinian protests on the Columbia campus. The Trump administration considers his views to be anti-Semitic and pro-Hamas, and therefore is a threat to his peers and foreign policy. Defenders of Mahmoud say that he's been wrongly accused because he was simply supporting the human rights of the Palestinian people, and that the government's illegal detention of him is violating his free speech. The next day, the Trump administration confirmed that Kilmar Abrego Gracia is in a prison in El Salvador, but they failed to comply with the judge's order to detail the steps it was taking to return him back to the United States. The judge's order came 1 day after the U.S. Supreme Court ordered his return. When the judge pointedly asked if the government has done anything to return him, Trump's attorney said he has no knowledge of the actions or plans to return Garcia, and that the government is actively considering what can be done. Finally, on Sunday, Trump posted that CBS and 60 Minutes should pay a big price for going after him. In his post, he accused them of fraudulent and beyond recognition reporting, specifically referring to a Kamala Harris interview and 2 60 Minutes segments that criticized Trump's approach to Ukraine and Greenland. Even though Trump isn't the first president to try to censor the press, and despite the freedom of the press being protected under the First Amendment, critics quickly point out that with Trump, the irony is rich, considering his whole brand is never admit defeat despite the facts, cherry-pick data to create false victories, reward loyalty over competence, and divide and conquer by dehumanizing and punishing anyone that criticizes him.